Welcome to the third installment. I see a lot of familiar faces. Who's been to at least one other one? That's awesome. Thank you so much for being part of this. Today we get to where we put the whole plan together, where we figure out how we're going to earn, save, and invest. So again, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for participating in the series. I am genuinely curious of your feedback after the series concludes. You know, what types of events would you want to see going forward? What really clicked? What didn't make as much sense? This was the first time doing this series, so really happy to hear anything from you and just very grateful. And thank you to my family for being so supportive. Swapped in a new picture of the little guy, and we got to see the girl on an ultrasound yesterday. She's still expected in January, so living a good life. I'm the author of Healthy Dough, Ingredients for the Financial Health You Crave, and hopefully if you choose to read the book that you got today, you're going to figure out how to make money a healthy and positive part of life. So we're in this last part of the series. Quick disclaimer, I'm here as a buddy. This is not professional financial advice. All right, and so now we can talk about earning money by working, saving, and investing in a way that beats inflation. And for those who were here in the very first session, you might remember the broccoli test, where we looked at a few facts about broccoli, and we're like, okay, well now we know that we're supposed to eat broccoli, but how do we stay motivated to do it? But today we're going to talk about some of the specific tips that I would have in these areas for how you can earn money by working, live on less than you make, which is going to be through utilizing a budget, and then investing in a way that brings good, positive results. So why do we do this? Why do we care so much about financial education? Well, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It impacts and is impacted by your physical, mental, social, and financial health. So if you make your finances a positive and healthy part of your life, a lot of times those other circles will follow as well, and vice versa. When you take care of your mind, your body, your relationships, oftentimes that has a positive impact on your financial results as well. And so apologies in advance, there will not be like step-by-step get-rich-quick instructions today, because look at that number up there, 43 quintillion combinations in a Rubik's Cube. You literally could not memorize, or like even if you wrote one combination per second, you would die before you wrote out all the combinations of how to solve a Rubik's Cube. But how do people do it? Well, they figure out the concepts of how they're going to solve that cube, and they can figure it out sometimes in under a minute. So that's more what we're going to focus on today, is like, okay, regardless of starting place or the puzzle that's in front of you, how do we apply those concepts rather than, hey man, tell me exactly what I should do? All right, so let's talk about earning. First step for earning is you're going to have to get your first job. Seems obvious, right? But it is kind of overlooked sometimes, I think. There's a lot that goes into getting that very first job, because has anybody ever applied for a job, an entry-level job, and been told you don't have enough experience? Yeah, isn't that ridiculous? It's tough, but that's why it's so important to find ways to differentiate without experience. And so things like showing up to events on campus, joining clubs, finding ways to make your resume really pop. And I think when I'm hiring people, I really prefer to see someone who has some sort of customer service background. So if they've worked at, they're a teller at a bank, or they've worked as a waiter or a waitress, or any of those types of jobs where you're dealing with people, because especially as we go forward and technology gets even more and more intense and part of the work life, those people skills are going to be even more important, in my opinion. So make sure if you see something for a resume workshop or a mock interview or something like that, do all your work, and please don't you dare show up not knowing what the job is, because you will not get the job. Make sure that you know what you're applying for, that you know a little bit about the company, like mission, vision, values, a little bit about what the company does, because a good interviewer, the first thing they're going to ask is, tell me what you want and what you know about the company. So make sure to do all those things to get that first job. And then we're going to resist the robots, because jobs are getting replaced by technology all the time. That doesn't mean technology is a bad thing. You just don't want it to replace your livelihood, right? You want to learn to use it, be the person who finds ways to utilize that technology. And so again, working on those things that are uniquely human that can't easily be replaced by a robot. So one example from my career field in accounting is we used to do a lot of data entry. A lot of, we're gonna crunch numbers all day, bust out that 10 key and just have a go with it. That's not really how it works anymore. A lot of things, even just like accounts payable invoices, we might have a text recognition program that does a lot of the coding in advance, and then it's more about like approvals and contracting and things like that. But what you're going to want to do is figure out how to ask the right questions. Figure out, okay, so we now have the technology that I can just put in a prompt and it builds the report I want. Okay, make sure that you know what a useful prompt would be. That's really where I suggest focusing your efforts, is becoming a decision maker. It also doesn't hurt, depending on the field that you're going in, be the revenue source, like be the person who's selling, be the person who's providing the service, those types of things, because a lot of the administrative jobs, like the corporate type jobs, are the ones that are more susceptible to technology. All right, and then you're going to work hard and work smart. Basically, picture any team you've ever been on. Be the type of teammate that you would want to have, right? You're going to want to be coachable. You're going to want to really play up your strengths. So for example, let's say you're trying to decide which college to go play football at or something like that. Well, if you have a skill set that really matches what they do, definitely consider that, but also work on making yourself a more well-rounded player. Same thing if you're a musician. If you're really good at shredding on the guitar, but you're not that great of a singer or songwriter, practice, develop that, but then build around that core skill of, in that case, playing the guitar. But really be a great teammate, be someone that you would want to work with, and that's going to help you keep and succeed in that job. This one is especially important to me today. My kid is homesick today. I got to just take the day off because I work at a place that has pretty decent work-life balance. And so when you're thinking about the type of job that you want and making your career a positive and healthy part of life, because remember, we're going back to you want your finances to be a healthy and positive part of life, pay is definitely going to be part of that, but it's not the only thing. And so something where you have fulfillment, you're connected to the company's mission, you have good relationships at work. Because has anyone ever had a bad boss? Raise your hand if you've had a bad boss. Oh no, we're being recorded. You're not, be careful who sees this. But yeah, everybody probably has a bad boss at some point in their life. That relationship can be one of the most impactful in your life overall, and that's really tough. So make sure you try and be somewhere where you have good relationships. But as you're getting started and you're building that initial experience, chances are that just getting something with adequate pay and benefits might feel a little bit more important, and then as you gain experience, you get to be a little bit more choosy. But honestly, even though I want to say this is something that everybody should have total balance of all the time, if you're struggling to get a job in general, it might just take getting a foot in the door to get that experience, and then you can figure out, okay, what do I like? What do I like doing? Who do I like working with? All that kind of stuff. So any quick questions on earning and career stuff, any of those tips before we talk about budgeting? Sweet, we'll keep going. So the best way to save is to use a meaningful budget. That's going to help you plan, be accountable, and monitor your spending. So what goes into a good budget? There's really only two things. You have your different categories, your income, expense, and your margin. Yes, all budgets need that. But then you just need a method that you can stick to. So an example I shared in the first session, my wife and I met when we were 29. We had both been financially on our own, for a while. And so we were used to our own patterns with budgeting. She does pencil and paper. She's really good at that. I use Excel. I'm really good at that. And so if we were to try and force the other to use a method that doesn't make sense to us, we wouldn't be quite as effective. And same thing with an app. Some people might be extremely effective using a budget app. Some people may find it to be a little overwhelming or not customizable enough. Just pick something that you can stick to that makes sense for you, whether that's pencil or paper or Excel or an app. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was curious about your opinion on like basically viewing it as one income when and like budgeting for like one income once you guys are married.
Oh, yeah. We combine everything, but the way that we track is individual. So like we have our shared bills and then we have individual bills. We have joint banking and then separate banking as well that each of us is, in tune with. We talk about it frequently. But yeah, I think that if you're not using the same budget model, just making sure that you're collaborating on everything, but you could also both be on the same budget model. Does that answer what you're thinking? Cool. Yeah, and I know that our situation is a little bit weird. I think for a lot of people, they would prefer to all be on one, but we're both pretty particular about how we want to see it. I'm useless on pencil and paper, and she doesn't want to do more Excel stuff outside of work. She works in HR, so does some, but doesn't live and love Excel the same way that an accounting nerd does. All right, there are a few required pieces of a budget, or I guess decision points with a budget that you're gonna wanna make. You wanna look at the time period. So some people do better, I think especially when times are tight, some people like to do a weekly budget and really be dialed in and specific. Other people might find that every paycheck, so a lot of common pay cycles are either bi-weekly, which is every other week, so every 2 weeks, which gives you 10 months that have 2 paychecks and then 2 months that have 3 paychecks, or it might just be twice a month, like the 1st and the 15th or something like that. But anyway, picking that right cycle is really important because, again, what can you stick to? Are you really going to do a budget weekly? I know I personally never have found the motivation to do a weekly, like dollar by dollar budget, but especially if times are tight or if you're struggling with accountability, then I think that shortening the cycle can be great. My personal preference is to do monthly, and I get paid bi-weekly, so in most months I get 2 paychecks, sometimes I get 3. I just make sure the budget is built on the least amount I expect in a month and then enjoy pocketing those extra paychecks or using it for vacation or something like that. So getting that time period right is really important. Again, what makes sense for your circumstances right now rather than what people say is best practice for anybody else or whatever they can sell, however that's set up. Net pay versus gross pay, I think, is pretty important. I don't want you to get too inundated in tracking, okay, here are my taxes that go to the state and here are my taxes that go to federal and stuff. You don't really have much control over that stuff. Really your net pay, I think, which is the amount that you actually get into your bank after you pay your taxes and any of your insurance and retirement contributions. So I prefer net pay. Some people might want to see everything broken out so then they can be livid about how much they're paying in taxes or whatever that purpose would be. But the next one is choosing the right expense categories. I usually like to go between 10 to 15 at most. I think any less than that, you run the risk of not having enough meaningful detail to make decisions. Any more than that, and it might be a little too granular and take up too much time, making it harder to stick to on a routine basis. But I think most budget templates have pretty similar expense categories, but go through and see which ones make sense to you and go from there. So after the series, we're going to take a look at everyone who attended any of the sessions in the series and then send out a final financial wellness starter packet with some of these other templates that didn't make it into the very first one that went out the first week. So you'll see my budget template, which honestly, you may not like it at all because it's very customized to how I like to see things, but also just the stock Excel budget template, which is plenty good. Optionally, and we'll look at fixed versus variable and essential versus non-essential on the next slide, but which features and which features and integrations do you want in your budget? Do you want it connected to your banking? Like some people might not. I'm always a little hesitant with that for fear of breach, but then I end up in breaches anyways. So we're all, the nice thing about being in a breach is then you get free credit monitoring, but I'm sure in the long term that it's probably not great the more that you're in. So anyway, all right, essential versus non-essential and fixed versus variable. Fixed just means that the amount doesn't change. Variable means the amount does change. My definition of essential expenses is that it is crucial to maintaining your health and well-being and safety. So things like housing and healthcare and those types of things I consider essential expenses. And regardless of whether it was for a good usage of debt or not, paying down loans is also essential because that's not really optional. Then for non-essential should basically just be fun. And if it's not fun, then stop doing it because it's not worth the money if it's not essential to your health and well-being and if it's not providing you with value in your life. So a couple examples up there, housing and loans. On the fixed essential, your amounts probably aren't going to change. And then for things like groceries, you could buy the same thing, same exact grocery list 5 weeks in a row, and the prices might be different every time because prices fluctuate. Or utilities, you might have fluctuation in your usage or stuff like that. So fixed, non-essential, variable, non-essential, those things all sound fun, right? They should be fun. And if they're not, and you think about it and you're like, is this really providing value to my life? And it's not, then great, you're going to get more money next month. One of the biggest things that I use that I think is a little bit unique that I don't see quite as often is sub-savings. So does anyone have a bank or credit union that allows you to break out sub-savings within your bank? I love it. I love it so much. And I tracked it in the individual account. So it's like you have your one checking account, but then you can set up different buckets that you transfer to and from within your checking or savings account. I ended up stopping using that feature because then I realized, I'd rather have all of that money in my high yield money market where it gets a little bit more interest rather than having all of these different divisions of my checking account. So now I just track it manually. But if we're not talking about a ton of money, then it probably doesn't matter what, the difference between 1% interest or 4% interest. It doesn't matter if the amounts are smaller. But anyway, I like to have it for things where I know there's going to be an expense that comes up. I know I'm going to have medical bills. I know that I'm going to have to do something with my vehicle. And I like to save for hobby stuff and travel and even gifts. So last year, Dean Merchant and I wrote an article together about holiday budgets and things like that. And it's at the very end, if you go to my link tree, you should be able to find that. And one of the things that we came up with is like, save up throughout the year. Don't get to the end of the year and be in a pinch and be scrambling for a holiday loan or something like that. Couple things that I really believe in is sometimes it might be a year where gifts aren't necessary or aren't a great idea. And that's okay. We're doing that in my family this year, and we're all pretty excited. We're a little bit relieved. And we're just going to focus more on spending time together. But also, setting aside $10 every paycheck is a lot easier than coming up with $200, $300 at the end of the year. So setting aside a sub-savings where you're just adding to this, and then as gifts come up, birthdays, holidays, whatever, anniversaries, you just draw down on that. So we'll include a template in that financial wellness starter packet in Excel, but we'll look at an example up here. So pretend that you spent less on your car in the prior year, so at the beginning of the year, you have like $325 set aside for your vehicle. You're going to spend the money. You're going to get oil changes. There's probably maintenance. You're going to get tabs. So you just pitch in, $50 a month or $100 a month, whatever your situation is. And then when stuff comes up, you just subtract it. You're literally just typing in dates, amounts, and labels. It's very, very easy. Very, very easy record keeping. But then you can see, rather than trying to come up in a span of, what does this end up being, 350-ish in a span of 3 weeks, you've been setting it aside as you go because you know it's going to come up. So it's nice to prepare and have that set aside as much as you can. Which leads me into what I call passion, fulfillment, and empowerment, PFE activities. This is the stuff I get so excited to budget for in a sub-savings because I set aside the same amount every single month, whether it ends up being $50 or $100, whatever makes sense at the time. And then when it comes time to go to a concert or go to a Seahawks game, or like my wife and I used to have tickets to the Seattle Reign. We had season tickets to the women's soccer team up north, and I would just budget for that throughout the year. And then when that big season ticket membership, came due, not that big, but anyway, we didn't feel bad about it because we'd already been planning for it. We'd been setting aside. And same with who wants to help me out and think of something that you might put in like this hobby or PFE fund?
Passes,
Yeah.
tickets for the ski resort.
Mm-hmm.
Because it comes up every spring for the following year. You get the discounted
Mm-hmm.
one, but it's like, I'm never ready for it. It's always
Yep.
like $700. And you're like, ugh,
Yeah.
I just paid them last year's off.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, go ahead.
So for me, I actually am sitting here like kicking myself because my husband and I have been talking about buying tickets to a show for about the last year, ever since it got announced that the show is coming around.
Mm-hmm.
Tickets go on sale in 2 weeks, and we haven't been saving for it. And I found out they're going to be like $200 each.
Oh no, which show?
Phantom of the Opera.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, they're bringing back the tour after it closed on Broadway a few years ago. And,
Cool.
it's going to be in Seattle in May, but tickets go on sale on the 25th of this month.
Yeah.
Why haven't we been saving it?
Yeah, $20 a month makes it a lot easier than coming up with all of it right away. Did someone else have hand up?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say probably just an expensive subscription,
Yeah.
just yearly, like she was saying, kind of.
Yep, for sure. And so having these things in your life is so, so healthy. If you're in a pinch and you're having to cut costs wherever possible, this definitely takes a back seat unless you can find ways to do it for free, which you can and you should. You should find ways to do your passion and figure out what makes you feel fulfilled and feel empowered for free. So, building a skill. I think so often what I go to is my historical hobbies, but in the past couple years when I wasn't able to do a lot of my hobbies, what I did was I tried to learn Spanish because I was having to just stay inside and rest a lot with some health issues, and so I made sure to set aside money for those Spanish lessons, and it was super awesome. I'm not very good. Let's see. Hablo un poquito. Leo un poquito, no escucho muy bien. Anyone speak Spanish and know what that means? How close was I?
Oh, you said it, well, the way you said it was right, it's just of course your accent is like.
Yeah. I'm trying.
But you speak it pretty well, honestly.
Well, thank you.
I could understand what you were saying.
But yeah, and so just finding those things that kind of light up your day that you get excited to go do. That's PFE, so make sure you're setting aside money throughout the year for that. I prefer as part of a sub-savings using this type of format, but find free ways to do it as well, because that's going to be much more sustainable. All right, investing, one of the fun ones. So where you want to focus on investing is where you have most control. And you do not control stock prices. You don't control which headline comes out and makes the market panic or go into a frenzy. You don't control any of that stuff. What you do control is when and how often. In a way, you have a little bit of influence over how much you can invest, obviously, because you have some influence over your earning, you have influence over your budgeting, so then that leaves what's left over to invest. But really, you want to focus on early and often. So as you make your way down the right in this table, you can see, yeah, as the return percentage goes up, as your earnings go up, of course it gets higher given the same amount of years. But also look how much bigger it gets as you have more time in the market. So even if you have 10 bucks today, or literally $1, you could open a Roth IRA with $1, and then you're on the board, you have it ready for any time. Then let's say you find a $10 bill in your pocket, go put it in your bank, transfer it to your Roth IRA. Like, once you have that set up and just available, it's awesome. Just do something as early as you possibly can, because time in the market is really, really what's going to do it. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I suppose, I haven't ever really budgeted in the course of my life, but now that I have a more steady job, and what I've tried doing, just because I like to spend money and I like spending paper money, so I'm not having my purchases categorized through my credit union account or anything like you've been describing. What I've tried doing is simply increasing the limits on my contributions to my voluntary investment plans and whatnot as means of making sure the money is already saved before I get
Yep.
the chance to spend it.
Love it.
That's about as much budgeting as I do, because I like to travel.
Yep. Awesome, yeah.
Is that a bad approach, or?
If it works for you and you're consistently producing a margin and putting something into your retirement, I don't think it's a bad approach. It's, I think there are, what's the phrase? A lot of roads lead to Chicago, or whatever that is. Like, you can get there a lot of different ways, whatever makes sense for you, as long as you're checking those boxes of, okay, am I spending in a reasonable way, saving and investing?
How liquid are those accounts you're talking about, like an IRA and all that? I mean, if I ever needed to get to emergency money, like how easy is it to get to?
It's easy to get to, but there might be penalties. Yeah, and I don't know how often those change or are updated, but generally there are some, like with a 401k, so through an employer-sponsored plan, and we'll talk about that in a second, you can take loans from that, and then you're paying yourself interest rather than borrowing from a bank. Honestly, I've done that a couple times when I've thought that the timing was just perfect, and I have loved doing that. So that's one option in an employer-sponsored one, like a 401k. Roth IRA, you can probably access it, get cash pretty quickly, but just make sure and keep an eye out for whatever the penalties are potentially for early withdrawal. Any of these tax advantaged accounts, it's really about early withdrawal penalties. And then if it were in a traditional instead of a Roth, you would owe the taxes that you hadn't paid yet, plus penalty unless it's for a qualified purpose.
And would the penalties be from the institution like Fidelity or TIA, or would they be from the IRS, or both?
IRS, yeah. I'm 99% sure that's right. Yep. Yeah, did you have another question?
Well, this is a random question, but let's say like you don't do your taxes for like a couple of years. What could happen? Like,
Sorry, say that again?
let's say you don't do your taxes for like a couple of years. What could happen?
Okay, let's come back to that one at the end and then jump back into the investing. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, really, time in the market is going to be what gives you the most. I mean, if you put in just $100 a month, which is a lot less than what people end up putting in the middle and end of their careers, these are some pretty big numbers for what is, it might sound big now, but it's a pretty smaller contribution. But if you have enough time, then it makes a huge, huge difference. Now, the next thing is investing often, because you're not likely to be able to time the market. And if you can, I think a lot of times people who time the market maybe have information they're not supposed to have. And chances are, us in this room, we probably don't. And so dollar cost averaging, which is basically just the theory that if prices are going up over time, the more frequently you buy, the more likely you are to just be close enough to that optimal result. So if we look down here at the different account values, or let's start here actually. Think about it in buying shares, like as if shares are a tangible thing. Maybe at some point before I was born, they were actually tangible, but now, that's just computerized and whatever, but you're just buying up shares. And so if you're putting in the same exact amount, the more frequently you do it, in this scenario where prices are going up over the period, the more frequently you buy, the higher your ending account balance is, because you're buying at that most like average-ish or close to optimal price. Sure, if you buy it just once at the very lowest price, that's great, and then you have the most value. But are you really going to be able to do that? I would think we're going to lose a lot more money guessing wrong than we are going to gain by guessing correctly. So really, this is the closest to like an easy way to buy low, sell high. We'll talk about another one in just a second, but in this scenario where you're buying more frequently, so every paycheck, or if it's not through your paycheck, every week or something like that. If you're putting in enough, like some might have a minimum investment of like $10 per transaction, you could literally do every day if you wanted to, but that may not be super practical. But this is the closest you're going to get to buying low, selling high. Because yeah, you might buy at the highest price point, but you're also going to buy at the lowest, and you don't have to worry about trying to time it. So coming back into tax-advantaged investing, which we talked about a little bit, this is really, I know I could put it into one sentence, and it's the most boring investment advice you will get ever, but investing early and often, using reliable index funds in tax-advantaged accounts. That's good enough. It's good enough for me. It's what I do. It's good enough for you. You might not get to talk about something super exciting at parties like, well, I doubled my investment last week. Like, well, yeah, but you're going to lose it next week if you don't cash out soon enough. So this boring, reliable strategy, it really is, if you start early and you do it frequently and you take advantage of these advantages that are offered by tax-advantaged accounts. Advantage 3 times in one sentence, and I didn't even finish the sentence. My bad. So the difference between these few plans, these are probably the most common that you're going to see. We have pre-tax, you might hear that as traditional as well. But looking at the grid, employer-sponsored or individual, and pre-tax or after-tax. After-tax is Roth, employer-sponsored means through work, whereas the other ones are on your own. In a pre-tax, you're going to pay less in your taxes now in relation to what you're contributing, and then when you pull out your money later in retirement, you're going to pay money on your contributions and your earnings. So if you're in a time period where your tax rate might be high, let's say you're earning a lot, you're in like that sweet spot of your career where you're earning the most, then pre-tax might be an awesome option. If you're young and just getting started and maybe in a lower tax bracket, after tax is a really awesome option. You really can't miss with either one, but there are different advantages. And I think there isn't a response on Ask Dan about that, about like when to, how to utilize the Roth accounts. And I think I have a little blurb in there about the differences. But anyway, if you expect that your tax rate will be lower in retirement than it is now, then I think using a pre-tax so that you are paying less in that higher tax bracket. And then if you think that it's going to be higher in retirement than it is now, or you're just young and you know that the money is going to be growing tax-free forever, because with Roth, you've already paid the taxes, you're never taxed on your earnings or contributions, so it can just grow and grow and grow. So anyway, any questions on that, since I took kind of a long-winded route to get there? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, so like, you know how your job sometimes, like they take money from your check, let's say. So that money, for example, goes to retirement, I know that, but like, does it, I don't mean to sound dumb, does it kind of work the same as the Roth IRA?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a matter of, so there are going to be slightly different rules for all of these, but it's the same concept. You're getting a tax advantage, you're getting basically some tax relief because the reason the IRS allows stuff like this, and same with different medical accounts like FSA and HSA, they want to reward healthy behavior, because if you have a good retirement account, you put a lot less pressure on Social Security. So they're willing to give tax advantages for investing in these preferred accounts, and same with things like an HSA and an or health savings account and flexible spending account, which are healthcare accounts. They're like, if you have money saved up in an HSA, that takes a little bit of pressure off of needing more benefits later, if that makes sense. So yeah, these are all, with the exception of when and how you pay the taxes, they're pretty similar, but the limits are different. You can put a ton more into a 401k than you can into an individual account. I'm sure there are some good reasons for that. Yeah, go ahead.
I had actually heard that there's like a limit for Roth IRA. I think like my friend, she had talked to me, the last time she had talked to me about it, she said it was like 8,000 a year or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah,
But
but there's actually like a limit and stuff.
yeah, there's a limit, and for Roth IRA, you can get phased out of it as well if you have an income over a certain point, but you can also find ways to get it into the Roth IRA after all. It's called a backdoor Roth, but that's probably beyond the scope today. But yeah, there are ways to get money into these accounts.
I mean, what if you started it and then like you start making more money, like, does that, so like your Roth IRA, just you get the money? So like let's say when you started the Roth IRA, you were making a lot and then you make a lot, so.
Oh yeah, you've already paid the taxes, it's dead and done. And so it doesn't like get taxed every year based on your new income and stuff like that. And did you have a question as well? Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, well, so I was wondering, for a tax bracket, like when you retire, is that gonna be based off of like how much you pull out of your?
Yeah.
Okay,
Exactly, because it's going to treat that as income, basically.
so you can technically like choose your tax bracket if you're able to live off
Uh-huh.
a little, okay. Got it.
Yeah, so if you, depending on what your living expenses are, if you're like, I'm only going to pull out a little bit of this account, it may land you in a lower tax bracket. So yeah, that is part of the planning, is how much do you think you're actually going to be withdrawing? So yeah, great question. Yeah.
Can you talk about how like you're connecting for your money in your employer sponsor account, but you do have to go in and do something with that into investing? Because like what we see is that some people don't invest it, it just stays in cash.
I did that when I
Oh.
first got it.
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
why have I only earned $5? Oh, because I didn't actually put it in anything.
Yeah, I did not know that. I've never had that. And then I'll jump to the next slide in just a sec. But the point was, sometimes when you do set money aside through your employer, that if you don't select your investments, then it just keeps it in cash. But you're going to want to make sure that you get into your online banking and actually select what you want. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. All right, so going from left to right here, here's kind of the progression that I want you to take. The first thing is just get on the board. Minimum contribution, if it's a Roth IRA, throw in that $1 or $10 or whatever, just get on the board. If it's through your employer, it's probably gonna have to be maybe a slightly bigger amount, like at least 1% of your wages or $10 per paycheck or something. But just do something, that minimum contribution, to get active and get on the board in these plans. The next piece is maximizing the employer match. So what an employer match is your employer is rewarding the healthy activity, because employers like when their employees retire. They don't want to get this weird like flow issue of people who won't retire, but they really, and then they can't fire them because of all the different things. Anyway, your employer wants you to retire and be financially healthy, because if you're not financially healthy, there's a higher risk of things like fraud and all that good stuff. So your employer wants you to be financially healthy, and so they may offer a matching contribution. So let's say if you put in 3%, your employer might say, okay, I will match you dollar for dollar up to 3%. Or they might say, I'll match you 50% up to 4%. So then if you put in 8% of your income, they may put in 4%. But it's a cap. Usually they have a top number. So if you put in 1%, then they'll put in 1% or 0.05% or whatever it is. And so hitting that next is great because that's really, it's like free money, but they've budgeted for it. They want you to do it or they wouldn't offer it. It's one of the ways that employers stay competitive is by having good employer matches and profit shares and things like that. So minimum, then you're going to max out what your employer is going to put into it. Then I want you to move on to a personal goal, whether that's that you're going to put in 8% of your income or 12 or 15 or something like that. It doesn't really matter. It just needs to fit with all of your other goals. So if you're still really, really interested in home ownership, maybe maxing out as much as you can put in doesn't make quite as much sense. Or if you have, you're expecting a big increase in costs because you're going to have kids or something like that. But picking that personal goal that makes sense beyond the employer match, and then you could always max it out. Max it out up to the legal limit. I think right now it's like $24,000 or something like that for a 401k. And but anyway, really that I think you can live very, very comfortably once you get into that personal goal territory beyond maximizing the match there. And then real quick, I'm going to zip through these. Some common investment strategies: diversify. So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to just have one stock or a group of homogeneous stocks, because that makes you more susceptible to changes in the market and the industry and just the economic environment in general. So I don't really get very fancy with diversification. I just pick index funds. And again, it's good enough for me. It's good enough for you. If you want to get trickier with it, have fun. Just do it with money that you're not counting on quite as much. So I think really that core investment strategy that works for most people: invest early, invest often, choose good index funds, and use those tax-advantaged plans. And then these are a couple opposing methods up here that I believe in both of them. Set it and forget it is basically you're just going to pick your funds and then you're not going to stress about it. You're going to go with something that's reliable. You can check your balances and get excited as you see things growing, and try not to panic when you see things plummet, because they are going to go up and down and up and down, generally up over time. My personal opinion is if we ever hit a time where our financial markets didn't go back up, we would have a lot of problems in general, not just financial problems. So I like to assume that they're going to continue to go up and up and up until they're not, and then my investment account probably wouldn't be my biggest worry at that point anyway, which is kind of dark to think about, but that's how I honestly view it. So the other version is reallocating as needed. This is where you're going to take a look at trying to buy low and sell high. So let's say that you have $100,000 in your account, and you have like $75,000 of that consists of equities or stocks where you own shares. Then 25% consists of debt where you're like lending. You don't own anything, but you're letting those businesses borrow your money. Well, let's say the stock market goes way, way up, and all of a sudden you have a way higher percentage of stocks than you used to. You were at 75, you kind of liked that. And now you're at like 90% stocks because the prices just went way up and the bonds stayed about the same. That kind of sounds like a nice time to sell, because you would be selling high, you could get back to your desired mix, your total dollars are the same, but your share mix would be different. So then let's say that the market corrects itself and all of a sudden you would have been back to 75% with your stocks. Well, you actually just mitigated a little bit of that decrease there because they would have been in the more stable bonds. Then the other piece of that, and I'm regretting not putting in charts in there. In the book, there are some charts on this where you can see kind of in a pie chart how that works and with specific prices. But then let's say that the stock market is really, really, really low, and you're like, oh, it's about to bounce back. You can make a killing on that. If you think that prices are going to bounce back, that's when you say, okay, well, my stocks went way down, My bonds probably went down a little bit, but not that much. Why don't I sell bonds and buy more stocks and then get back to my desired percentage of, some people have a fixed percentage like 75-25. I've even read older methodologies that were more like 50-50. Some people say 1 minus your age should be your proportion of equities, stocks. But whatever it is that makes sense to you and fits with your goals, but reallocating, reallocating is something that I've done a couple times when I'm like, no, that's way too high. The underlying results of these businesses does not match these ridiculous prices. Why don't I sell high real quick? Not with a ton, but still something, and it works out if you guess right. But again, you're just guessing, so be careful with that. All right, last piece here, setting healthy goals. So what do people set goals for? Going back to that 4 circles of health graphic. Has anyone ever set a New Year's resolution? Has anyone ever failed? Yeah, I used to be a chronic New Year's resolution failer. And my guess is that based on the general guidance that a lot of people give up on their New Year's resolutions by March, yeah, chances are most of these failed too. It's not the most reliable study, it's a really small sample size, but let's be honest, it looks like what we know, what we've probably done, and what people we know have done. I love this one. 2025, this same study was conducted, but 43% said, no way, I'm not setting a resolution this year. That's just gonna make me sad. But look at everything. Everybody is wanting to improve their mind, their body, their relationships, and their finances. So how could we do something more meaningful than to just say, to exercise more, to save more money? We can do activities-based goals, which I use a system called BAT goals. I use it myself, and I really love it. But basically, you're gonna celebrate the healthy activities, you're gonna get the little wins, and you're gonna make it a lot easier to just get started and get going. Because you know what's a lot easier to start? Saying, I will eat at least 1 vegetable at dinner, rather than saying, I'm gonna lose 80 pounds. You can start with the steps, focus on the steps that are gonna take you there, rather than just I have to get to this point no matter what. That's way too much pressure, and it just doesn't work for most people. And it takes a very certain type of mindset for that to really work, and maybe it's not even in a healthy way. So BAT, benefit, action, timing. Example here, let's pretend that there's no healthy lunch options near work and you've been mostly dining out and you're starting to not feel great and you're noticing that your bank account is really light. Well, you could make a goal to pack a healthy lunch to work every day. That's going to help you save money, and you may feel better as part of the process. You might even save more time by just packing up leftovers from your dinner, cooking a little bit more in bulk, and then packing that. So, goal is an I will statement of I will do this action, this frequency. Your benefits that you're trying to get, in this case, is you're going to lower your expenses and improve your nutrition. A lot of times these goals do have multiple points in them, so I always go back to setting a goal for a healthy activity I'm going to walk 30 minutes a day with a loved one. That is good for your mind, body, relationships, and your finances because it's free. And then in this case, timing is work days. So this is the last functional slide here. Anyone want to be brave and volunteer a resolution-ish type goal that we can walk through? And if not, we'll pick one of the other resolutions.
Could you just give an example, kinda?
Yeah. Yep, so we have that one, and then let's pick to save more money. Makes sense, we're in a financial ed class today, so I'll go with that one, and it's top of both of these charts, which makes sense because times are weird out there. So save more money. What is a healthy activity that we can think of that could help us save more money, and how often could we do it? Yeah?
You get a book, because this might sound well, not dumb, I hope not dumb, but I saw a book where you can just save money every day. Just put $2 to $3 in there, every day, save up money.
Okay, so having kind of a ritual that you do where you're literally setting something aside?
Yeah,
Sweet, yeah, so we could say, I will save more money by putting loose cash in this book every day, something like that. So that sounds doable. That sounds like something that you could remember just as easily as like, I'm gonna brush my teeth or something like that. You wanna make it easy. So then let's look at another one. Let's see if we can have, to spend less time on social media. I love that one. I hate social media. For me, it's just so overwhelming, and it always knows what I want. It's like, hey man, you need to go on this hike, but only after you've bought this home gym. Like, come on, it's one giant ad. So no judgment on anyone who uses it. I personally hate it. It's too much for me. But spend less time on social media. So what could we do instead? What's a healthy activity? Yeah, go ahead.
It's not quite an instead, but it's been really helpful for me. There's some apps that will like stop, like when you press, TikTok, right? It'll pop up a screen being like, hey, you've opened TikTok this many times. And it blocks you, and you can customize everything. Like, what does it say? How it blocks you from using it. And it's been helping me a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's a lot of apps that kind of do different things, but they can, stop the mentality of opening or just spending so much time on it.
Yeah, so let's do that one. We can say, I will use screen time monitoring so that I can reduce time on social media and spend more time with loved ones. Or even more quality time, because you might be spending time but not getting as much quality time. So yeah, let's see, did we do that right? In order to get more quality time with loved ones, I will set screen limits and use app monitoring daily or something like that, Yeah, that was awesome, thank you. And I think we're at time, I'm guessing, but I just gotta say, I really appreciate you all being here. This means so much to me. It's been very fun for me. I hope you've gotten something out of it. And again, if you have any feedback on what has worked, what you think could be better next time, what else you want me to come onto campus to help support, more than happy to do that. Hit me up on Ask the End Anything. And yeah, thank you all so much. It means the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.